The Culvert Thing. Cal Rourke kept one hand on the wheel and one finger hooked under the loose edge of the dash where the vinyl had peeled back. The truck rattled through the washboard road in low gear, dust boiling up behind them in a pale brown wake that hung in the late afternoon heat. The radio crackled once, then fell back into static. Evan Pike leaned an elbow out the open passenger window and squinted toward the distant concrete scar cutting across the desert ahead of them. The culvert mouth looked small from this far out, just a dark slit in the earth beneath the dry riverbed. "That's it?" Evan said. "All this for a hole in the ground?" Cal didn't look over. "That hole in the ground moves more water in one storm than you'll drink in your whole life." Evan snorted. "You always make it sound romantic." "Hydraulics aren't romantic," Cal said. "They're just patient." The truck bounced over a shallow rut, and Evan grabbed the dash, knocking an empty coffee cup into the footwell. He let it roll. "So, what exactly are we looking for again?" Evan said. "County says inspection, but they always say inspection. That can mean anything from a cracked baffle to half the tunnel collapsing." Cal slowed as the road dipped toward the wash. The late sun burned white against the concrete ahead. "Flash floods last month," he said. "Up in the foothills. They think debris got driven deep into the system. Blockage, undermining, could be scouring behind the walls." "And they sent us," Evan said. "2 guys in a pickup." Cal finally glanced over. "You wanted field work." "I wanted bridge decks and pump houses," Evan said. "Not whatever's down there." He nodded toward the culvert again. The mouth of it swallowed light. Cal eased the truck to a stop just short of the concrete apron. Dust rolled forward and settled around them in a gritty veil. The desert was quiet in the way only wide, dead places ever were. No wind, no birds, just the faint ticking of hot metal cooling. "County doesn't like to advertise when they don't know what's wrong," Cal said. "You don't send crews into something you can't see unless you're already desperate." Evan watched the shadow under the culvert where daylight simply ceased. "You ever been in one this big?" he asked. Cal shut off the engine. The sudden silence felt heavy. "Bigger," he said, "but never this dry." They climbed out into the heat. The smell of baked dust and old concrete lay thick in the air. The culvert's opening was wide enough to swallow a semi-truck side by side with another, its interior disappearing into layered darkness. Faded measurement marks were painted along the outer wall, half bleached by the sun. Evan retrieved their packs from the truck bed while Cal checked the sky out of habit. High clouds were building far to the north, thin and feathered, barely more than a suggestion. Evan slung his pack over one shoulder. "Feels wrong, doesn't it?" Cal hesitated. "Everything feels wrong before it feels normal," he said. "That's just nerves." They strapped in shoulder lights, checked batteries, clipped radios to their harnesses. The beam from Cal's headlamp spilled into the culvert and was swallowed within a few yards. Evan stood at the threshold, boots on concrete, the rest of him still in sunlight. "You ever get the feeling," he said quietly, "like a place is already awake before you enter it?" Cal stepped past him, crossing the line where heat gave way to cool shadow. "Yeah," he said. "That's why you don't hesitate." Their lights cut forward together as they walked in. Behind them, the desert stayed dry. For now. Their footsteps changed first. On the sun-baked apron outside, every step had cracked sharp against the concrete. Inside the culvert, the sound softened, swallowed by distance and the curve of the tunnel, returning as a dull, hollow echo that seemed to lag half a second behind them. Each footfall felt doubled, once beneath their boots, and again somewhere deeper, farther ahead. Cal counted steps without meaning to. A habit from old work. After 50 paces, the world behind them was already reduced to a pale, distant rectangle of light. The air cooled fast. Moisture beaded on the walls in thin, dark streaks that hadn't been there at the entrance. Old water scars. The floor was layered with silt baked into rippled ridges like the bed of a long-gone river. Evan swept his light across the curved ceiling. Place echoes like a cathedral. "Sound travels," Cal said. "So does pressure." They moved in parallel, 5 feet apart, lights angled to overlap. Their radios crackled once as they passed beneath a thick vein of rebar embedded in the concrete roof, then stabilized. After another 100 yards, the tunnel split. A smaller maintenance passage branched off to the left at a shallow downward angle, its opening ribbed with rusted steel supports. The main culvert continued straight ahead, broad and featureless, vanishing into darkness. Cal stopped at the junction. County map says the obstruction was reported past the third junction, he said. Main line. Evan angled his light down the side passage. The beam caught standing water 20 yards in, black and perfectly still. Someone could live down there, Evan muttered. No one should, Cal said. They stayed on the main line. The culvert sloped downward so gradually Cal barely felt it at first, but the floor grew slick with a fine, gritty film. His boots whispered instead of crunching. The air took on a faint mineral smell, wet stone in a place that was supposed to be dry. They passed chalk markings left by the last inspection crew years earlier, dates from the late 80s, initials, a crude sketch of a skull with an arrow pointing deeper into the system. Evan chuckled when he saw it. Guess we're not the first ones to get creeped out. Cal didn't answer. He had stopped counting steps when he realized the echoes no longer matched their pace precisely. The return of their footfalls was arriving just a fraction too early now, blending with the originals in a way that turned each step into a smeared shape of sound. They reached the second junction. This one was worse, multiple lateral tunnels diverging like spokes, some sloped, some level, some dropping away sharply out of sight. Old debris lay scattered across the floor here, lengths of broken conduit, a rusted shopping cart, a tangled pile of branches driven in during some long-ago flood. Cal knelt, running a hand across the silt. Recent, he said. Last storm? Evan asked. Last few days, Cal said. Evan frowned. But they said the wash hasn't run since the foothill flooding. No rain down here since. Cal stood slowly. Water travels, he said. You don't always see where it starts. They moved on. The third junction lay deeper than expected. Their radios hissed with more frequent interference now, bursts of static that came and went without pattern. The ceiling dropped an inch at a time until Cal found himself dipping his head unconsciously. Somewhere ahead, water dripped. Not the steady percussion of a leak, just a rare, isolated plink, then long silence, then another. Evan paused beneath one of the drips and tilted his face up. That's new, he said. Cal traced the sound with his light. A thin fracture ran along the ceiling above, darkened by moisture. Nothing visibly flowing, just present. He keyed his radio. Marking moisture breach, Sector 3, logging location. The radio answered with a burst of static and a faint, delayed echo of his own voice layered beneath it. Evan lowered his headlamp beam, uneasy. Radio's lagging. Rock density, Cal said. Rebar, signal bounce. They took another 10 steps. The drip behind them stopped. Not gradually. Instantly. Cal slowed. What? Evan said, catching the shift in his posture. Listen. They stood. At first there was nothing but the soft ringing in their own ears after movement. Then, so faint Cal nearly missed it, a tremor shivered through the soles of his boots. Too subtle to be a vibration. More like pressure, a displacement of mass through unseen space. Something moved. Not ahead of them. Beside them. Far off, deep inside the left branch tunnels they had passed, a low disturbance rippled through stagnant water. A soft, spreading sound like a hand dragged slowly across the surface of a pond. Evan whispered, "Tell me that was you." Cal switched off his headlamp. Darkness collapsed in around them, dense and total. Only Evan's light remained, a lone white cone slicing forward through the culvert. "Shut yours off too," Cal murmured. "What? Why?" Sound travels on vibration. Light reflects. If it's water-driven, It'll orient off both. Evan hesitated, then clicked his light off. Blackness swallowed them both. They stood in it, breathing carefully. The culvert was no longer silent. Something far ahead disturbed the water again, slow, deliberate this time, a thick, dragging movement, as if a heavy body were easing through a shallow pool. Then it stopped. Cal held up 2 fingers in the dark. Wait. A new sound answered him. Not water. A slow, rhythmic scrape against concrete. 4 points of contact. Moving. Toward them. From a direction that should have been dry. Cal's hand went to his harness. Evan, he whispered, barely louder than breath. Move. Slow. No splashing. They took their first step backward at the same moment a distant surge roared through the tunnels beyond. Deep, rising, sudden. Far above the desert, the storm had finally broken. And the culvert had begun to wake. The sound reached them as a dull thunder first, felt more than heard, a distant rolling pressure that seemed to press outward through the walls instead of down the tunnels. Cal knew that sound. He'd felt it once, years ago, half a county away from a flash flood that took out a bridge in under 30 seconds. Water was coming. Not her yet, but moving fast. Turn your light back on, Cal whispered. Low angle, floor only. Evan fumbled for the switch. A narrow blade of white slid across the silt at their feet, catching on the glimmer of damp grit and the faint shimmer of shallow pooled water creeping in along the floor seams. The scrape came again. Closer. It echoed oddly now, distorted by widening pockets of air displaced by distant incoming flow. Something with mass was shifting position in response to the pressure change, something that knew what that sound meant. Cal backed up 1 careful step at a time, eyes never leaving Evan's thin cone of light. We retreat to the second junction, high ground, now. Evan nodded too quickly. His breathing was already changing. They moved. Behind them, unseen in the branching dark, the scrape accelerated. Not a sprint. A repositioning. The first real surge hit seconds later. Water spilled out of a side passage ahead of them in a sudden, dirty cascade, only a foot deep, but fast. Silt boiled as it spread across the floor, swallowing their footprints instantly. Evan swore. That wasn't here 30 seconds ago. Cal grabbed his shoulder and pushed him toward a sloping maintenance ramp angling upward along the right wall. Move. The main channel will fill first. They climbed as the water rushed in beneath them, the sound growing from a murmur into a roar that filled the tunnel with violent, living noise. Evan's boots slipped on wet concrete and Cal caught him by the strap of his pack, hauling him upright. The ramp leveled into a narrow ledge 5 feet above the floor. They stood there listening to the water race past below like a river released from prison. Then something broke the surface. It didn't rise fully into view. Only part of it surfaced. Just enough for Evan's light to catch pale, slick skin and the blunt curve of a shoulder or flank. Water streamed off it in sheets as it moved across the current diagonally, not fighting it, but using it. It touched the opposite wall with a wet, deliberate slap. Clung. Then rose. It stood halfway upright now, unfolding from the water on jointed limbs that bent the wrong way. Its skin reflected light in dull bands like scarred stone polished by years of abrasion. No hair, no visible eyes in the glare, just a blunt forward-leaning head and a ribcage that rose and fell far too slowly for something that had just moved that fast. Evan froze. Cal whispered, "Off. Light. Now." Too late. The creature's head tilted. The sound it made wasn't a roar. It was a sudden vibration. Deep in its chest, felt more than heard, a rapid internal thunder that shattered the water's surface beneath it into trembling ripples. And then it dropped. It hit the water on all fours and vanished beneath the flood in a single violent fluid motion. The ledge they stood on shook as something massive passed beneath. Cal turned and ran. They sprinted along the elevated maintenance path as the water climbed fast behind them, the roar now so loud it erased all other sound. Their lights bounced wildly over concrete ribs and rusted rungs as they tore through the tunnel toward the second junction. Evan was gasping now. Cal, it's gaining! The water surged higher behind them in ragged pulses, driven by distant pressure and the narrowing geometry of the channel. The creature surfaced again 20 yards back, pacing the current with long, loping strides, half swimming, half running, using the water like a moving floor beneath it. It was hunting with the flood. They burst into the second junction as the first branch tunnels began vomiting water in thick, uneven arcs. Cal lunged for the nearest vertical ladder bolted into the wall and shoved Evan toward it. Up! Don't stop! Don't look down! Evan grabbed the rungs and climbed. The water rose fast enough now that Cal felt it strike his calves as he followed, cold, crushing, pulling at his boots as he climbed. Below them, the surface of the flood exploded. The creature launched upward in a violent surge of water and muscle, slamming into the wall beneath their ladder. Its limbs clawed uselessly against sheer concrete for one terrible second, then it dropped back into the torrent with a sound like a collapsing wall. Evan screamed as Cal shoved him higher. They climbed blindly now, lungs burning, hands slipping on wet iron. The shaft narrowed as it rose, choking upward into vertical darkness. The roar below deepened. The flood was still rising. Cal reached up for the next rung and felt the ladder shudder violently beneath his hands. From below, something struck the wall again. Harder this time. The shaft rang like a bell. The creature wasn't trying to climb. It was timing the surges, waiting for the water to lift it high enough to reach them. Cal shouted, "Don't stop! It's using the current to jump!" Evan's boot slipped. He kicked wildly, caught another rung, and hauled himself higher with a rasping cry. The water struck Cal's knees, thighs, waist. The pressure was enormous now, a living force clawing at him, trying to tear him from the ladder. Below, in the violent black churn, something shifted position directly beneath him. Cal kicked upward and reached. His hand closed on Evan's ankle just as the ladder tore free from the wall. Rust shrieked. Bolts burst. The lower half of the ladder peeled away and vanished into the flood. Cal and Evan swung violently, suspended by the few remaining rungs above the break. And below them, the creature surged upward in a rising column of black water, reaching. The creature's hands broke the surface first. They were not hands in any human sense, elongated, webbed, ending in hooked, stone-hard digits that scraped sparks from the ladder's remaining rungs as it surged upward on the lift of the flood. Its momentum carried it higher than physics should have allowed, body following in a violent arc of water and muscle. Evan screamed. Cal felt the ladder rip another inch from the wall. "Kick, Evan, kick!" Cal shouted, straining upward with one arm locked around Evan's ankle, the other clamped white-knuckled to the highest intact rung. The creature slammed into the broken end of the ladder. The impact traveled through the metal and into Cal's bones like a hammer blow. Evan lost his grip for half a second, just long enough for gravity and panic to win. He slid. Cal's grip caught him at the calf. Skin burned under his glove. The creature struck again, higher this time, riding a fresh surge, its blunt head breaking the surface beneath them. Water sheeted off its face in oily curtains. In the brief flare of Evan's swinging light, Cal saw the mouth, wide, lipless, lined with uneven inward curving teeth, built not for tearing but for holding. The ladder tore another few inches free. "Cal!" Evan cried. His voice was high, breaking. "I can't!" The creature leapt. I did not miss. Its jaws closed around Evan's lower leg with a wet, concussive sound that cut even through the roar of the flood. Evan's scream went into a pitch Cal had never heard from a human throat. The creature wrenched downward with brutal economy, using the full weight of the water and its own body in a single efficient pull. Bone snapped. Cal felt the sudden loss of weight like a physical blow to the chest. His grip tore free as Evan was ripped from his hands and dragged downward, vanishing in a storm of black water and thrashing limbs. Evan's light spiraled once as he fell, painting the shaft in wild, frantic white, then disappeared beneath the surface. His scream ended in a choking gurgle. Then there was only water. Cal screamed Evan's name into the void until his throat burned, but the flood swallowed the sound whole. Below him, the surface boiled once more as the creature submerged with its kill and was gone. The ladder shuddered again. The remaining bolts were failing. Cal forced himself to move. He climbed. Every second the shaft trembled with the violence below. Water surged higher, cresting dangerously close to the broken ladder's end. The thunder of impact echoed upward as the creature repositioned beneath him, slamming against the walls in heavy, deliberate arcs, testing for weakness, listening for vibration, mapping the shaft through sound. Cal climbed until his arms went numb and his lungs felt like they were tearing. At last, his fingers struck concrete. He clawed upward, hauling himself over the lip of the maintenance shaft and into a narrow horizontal passage that sloped sharply upward. He collapsed there for one shuddering second, chest heaving, then scrambled forward as a new surge thundered up the shaft behind him. The water followed. Not fast enough to carry the creature with it, not yet, but rising with terrifying certainty. Cal stumbled through the low passage on hands and knees, headlamp bouncing wildly. The tunnel narrowed, then widened abruptly into a vertical overflow chamber split by rusted iron grates and emergency spillways. Warning paint peeled from the walls in long, curling strips. He had seen schematics like this once, decades ago. Overflow shafts bled excess floodwater into desert washes to prevent catastrophic back pressure deeper in the system. If it was still open, he ran for the wall. Behind him, water erupted from the shaft in a roaring black column. The creature broke the surface again only once, its shoulders and head emerging in a single violent surge as it hurled itself after him. One hooked hand caught the broken lip of the shaft and tore a chunk of concrete free as it hauled itself higher. Cal reached the spillway ladder and climbed. The chamber filled with the sound of impossible water, vertical, horizontal, everywhere at once. He climbed as the creature surged repeatedly against the shaft behind him, each impact closer than the last. His head struck hard metal, a grated ceiling. He shoved at it helplessly, light trembling in his shaking hands. The grate shifted an inch, then another. Below him, the creature hit the shaft wall with enough force to crack concrete. Cal screamed and slammed his shoulder upward. The grate gave way. He exploded through into open night as a wall of water and sound followed him out of the earth. He hit gravel and rolled, skin shredding as the overflow vent became a geyser behind him, vomiting floodwater in a violent roar into the once dry wash. He crawled blindly, choking on dust and mist until the ground fell away into open desert. The night sky was a boiling mass of clouds now, lightning flickering far to the north like distant artillery. Rain slashed sideways across the sand. The overflow channel behind him roared like a living throat. Cal dragged himself another 20 yards before his body gave out. He lay there shaking, staring at the black mouth of the vent. For a long time, nothing emerged. Then, far back within the roaring throat of concrete and water, something struck the grate from below. Once. Twice. Each impact rang through the desert like a distant bell. Then the sound faded as the flood volume increased and the water claimed the shaft completely. Cal lay in the rain until dawn. They found him 12 hours later. They never found Evan. And long after the stormwater receded, long after the culvert ran dry again, maintenance crews would report strange fractures in the concrete deep within the system, fresh scars where something heavy had rammed the walls, waiting for the next time the desert chose to wake it. Thank you for watching. Please remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe. And as always, have a wonderful day.